Since publishing my video a few months ago about how to electronically file your own provisional patent application, I've had several people write me and say, "Hey John, can you give us a template and show us how to write a provisional patent application step by step?" Well, this video does that. I'm going to provide you with a downloadable template for a provisional patent application, and I'm going to go through it step by step and show you how to write your own provisional application. Hi, my name is Carr Ferrell. I'm a Silicon Valley patent attorney. Welcome back to my channel. Okay, if you haven't done so already, the first step is to pause this video and go down to the description section and download a copy of the provisional application template. Now, my hypothetical fictitious invention is called Systems and Method for Detecting and Removing Jitter from Video. So let me tell you a little bit about the invention. First of all, and most importantly, this is a fictitious invention. It may or may not work. I just made it up. When my kids were growing up, I had a VCR camcorder, and I took lots of video of my kids running around, playing in the snow. Well, the problem with the video, as I went back to look at it, is there was a lot of jitter in the video. In those days, there was no such thing as image stabilization. And as a photographer and a videographer, I certainly wasn't very stable. And consequently, there's a lot of shaking that's going on in the video, especially as I was zooming in and zooming out. This was really amateur videography. So I had this idea. Wouldn't it be great to find a way to eliminate the jitter using digital signal processing and artificial intelligence to tell what was actual shaking of the camera versus moving of the subject in the camera, maybe the moving of my kids as they were running around the yard. So the way to do this, it seems to me, is to look at elements in the video that normally don't move. Things like trees and mountains in the distance, maybe flowers, houses, things in the video that normally you wouldn't expect to be moving. And if they are they moving together, indicating that the whole camera is moving, or are they moving differently relative to each other, indicating that there might be a change in perspective caused by something in the video actually moving, like a car moving relative to a tree. So the invention is grab some pixels in the various elements of the video image and make a decision as to whether the video itself is shaking or the elements within the video are moving independent of each other. If all the elements in the video image are moving together in synchrony, then it probably means that the camera's shaking, and we want to eliminate or subtract out that synchronous movement. And in doing so, we should be able to pretty simply and algorithmically remove the jitter from the video. Okay, with that background of my hypothetical and fictitious invention, let's jump into the provisional patent application template and see how we might write up our own description of our provisional patent application. Now, it's important to understand as we write up this provisional patent application that there are no set formality requirements for writing a provisional patent application. These are just suggestions. I provide this template as a guideline, and if you include the elements that I've included in this template, you're very likely to have an enabling provisional patent application that will be useful in supporting a utility application later. Okay, first thing is, it's important to start with a strong title. The title for my fictitious invention is Systems and Methods for Detecting and Removing Jitter from Video. Now, I think it's important to have a descriptive title. Now, I could have used a title like Video Editor, but I just think it's helpful to have a more descriptive title. It'll help you flesh out the invention as you go through and write it up. And also, it'll help you identify and distinguish later inventions that you might have. You might not pick this document up for another year, and having a descriptive title will help remind you, at least at the time, what you thought the invention was. So again, Systems and Methods for Detecting and Removing Jitter from Video. When working up the title of your invention, think about what is it and what does it do. For example, you might have a solar-powered margarita machine that's useful for making margaritas on the beach. Instead of calling this just a beverage apparatus, you might title it something like Solar-Powered Portable Beverage Mixer. Another silly example is maybe you have a panini machine that's useful in also making tortillas. So instead of just calling this a cooking utensil, title it something like Combination Sandwich Toaster and Tortilla Press. The point is, I think it's really useful to have a title that's descriptive and really describes what it is your invention does. Now, the first section I have in my provisional application template is something called the background of the invention. Now, again, this is optional, but this is a great place to describe the problem that your invention is addressing. What makes this invention valuable, and what were people doing to address the problem prior to your invention? Okay, after we've completed the background of the invention, the next step is to work on the description, the written description of the invention. And I'd like to start with the figures. Some years ago, I was representing a large film company in the Bay Area of San Francisco, and they were working on an animated feature film. And when I was at their facility one day, I noted that they had this storyboard that was laid out on a long hallway in the facility. And the storyboard consisted of several hundred pages of slides showing each of the scenes of the animated feature film, where each page had positions of characters and a little bit of dialogue. But as you walk down the hallway, looking at page after page, you could see the entire story, the entire sequence of the story of the animated film. Patent figures are like this. The patent figures tell the story of the invention, starting with the big picture, the context, the wide scene in Figure 1, the overview of the invention, the overview of the system, and then sequentially narrowing down figure after figure, telling the story, narrowing down on each of the elements with character development until finally we get towards the end with the conflict and the resolution, where we get to the point of novelty of the invention. So if you think about figures as telling the story of the invention, then the rest of the patent description becomes so much easier to write. Now, for my simple example, the figure set is really pretty easy to understand. And my figure set is fairly typical of software type inventions. Taking a look at Figure 1, it's really just the layout of a general purpose computer, the processor unit, a main memory, mass data storage, input-output controller. This is what you would expect of a general purpose computer, the elements of a general purpose computer running a specialized software algorithm, in my case, that would allow you to remove jitter or shake from a video file. If your invention is, let's say, a new roller skate ball bearing set, then your first figure would be perhaps a roller skate. And then in the second figure, you might take a look at the wheel. And then Figure 3 and Figure 4, you might explode the wheel and show the cage or the race in which the ball bearings are housed. And each figure, figures 1, 2, 3, 4, however many figures, are going to get into more detail leading up to the point of novelty of your invention. And looking back at my invention, my Figure 2 is a sequence of steps of how the algorithm works. It imports the video frames, it detects shake in the frames, it stabilizes the image, and then it combines the frames again in order to produce a final image. My third figure in this sequence of figures, Figure 3A and Figure 3B of my template, show images that I'm going to use in the description of my invention that'll help me explain the invention. And then Figures 4 and Figures 5 go into the details of the algorithm, because really my invention is a computer algorithm. It's a sequence of steps as opposed to a machine such as a roller skate or a fajita machine. But in the general case, we want to start with a big picture of Figure 1 and then narrow down until we get to the point of novelty, telling the story of our invention. Now, I'd like to point out a couple of special things about the figures. Looking at Figure 1 of my template, notice that each of the elements of this figure have a 3-digit number associated with them. This 3-digit number helps in the description because I'm able to refer back or reference these element numbers in the figures when I'm describing the invention. Also notice that the element numbers have 3 digits as opposed to 1 or 2. Normally, patent attorneys reserve 1 digit or 2 digit for the figure number. 3 digits or 4 digits are used for the element number. And notice that on figure 1, all of the elements start with the number 1. This means that the first time that this element was referenced, it was referenced in figure 1. So 110, 120, main memory 120, if we see the main memory 120 described somewhere in the description, we can go back to figure 1 because that's probably where it was first introduced. These are small things, but they'll certainly give your do-it-yourself provisional patent application a lot more pop and make it more efficient for the patent attorney who converts your provisional patent application to the utility application later. If you've taken the time to organize your figures as I've described, the invention description should pretty much write itself. You start with figure 1 and you describe each of the elements of figure 1. For each of the elements, you want to describe the elements. If it's an uncommon element, you want to describe where the element comes from. Where do you get one? How do you make it? And then importantly, how it's connected, how the elements are connected together. And we do this for each of the elements in each of the figures. Figure 1, figure 2, figure 3. Just step through each of the elements and describe what each element is, how it's connected. If it's a method invention or an algorithm as mine is, we want to go through each step by step, one step leading into the other, how you perform each step, and then how you get to the next step. But the idea is that we want to walk through each of the invention elements, each of the figures, until we get to the end. And once we've done that, it's almost a certainty that our invention will be sufficiently described to enable another person to make and use our invention. Now, one thing I'd like to add about my fictitious invention, my description, this is a template. I'm not sure that I have enough detail in my invention to support patentability. After all, I'm not even sure my invention works. So my invention was hypothetical, it was fictitious, it's exemplary only. So don't just copy my words, changing the words for your invention and expecting that to be enough, because I'm not sure that I've included enough detail about my invention to make it patentable, mostly because my invention was never intended to be an invention. It's purely fictitious. Okay, the very last thing I've included in my invention template is an exemplary claim. And I made a video a couple of months ago where I explained why I like to include a patent claim in a provisional patent application, even though it's not required to do so. There's no requirement to include a patent claim in a provisional patent application, but I think there's a couple of reasons that having a patent claim can be useful. First of all, it just reminds you 9 months to a year from now when you sit down to convert your provisional patent application to a utility application, it gives you a summary of what you were thinking your invention really was at the time. But more importantly, it provides a checklist of the important elements in your invention. And a patent claim really is nothing more than a listing of the essential elements and how they're connected together in order to create something inventive. That is, something new, useful, and non-obvious. Having this checklist can be very useful when preparing a provisional patent application because it's a reminder for each of the elements to make sure you have sufficient description in the write-up and in the figures in order to support the invention. So I like to have a provisional patent application claim, not because it's a requirement for the provisional patent application, but because it acts as a checklist. It's a reminder to me to make sure I've included all the important detailed description in the write-up and in the figure. And that's it. If you completed all of the parts of my template in the way that I've described with enough detail so that someone else can make and use your invention, then your provisional patent application should support a priority date as of the date of filing. Okay, let's stop for just a second. I totally get it that preparing and filing your own patent application can be a lot of fun. It's also really satisfying to file your provisional patent application and to be able to mark your products patent pending. But writing and filing your own provisional patent application is not without its complications. It can be time-consuming, and depending on your invention, it's pretty easy to get stuck. If you get to the point where you feel like you could use some professional help, maybe just to review your patent write-up, or even to help you write and file the entire application, let me invite you to reach out, send me an email message at the address below. I'd be happy to help you set up a patent attorney consultation. And now that your provisional patent application is completed, you're going to want to electronically upload it to the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office Patent Center. In this next video, I explain exactly how to do that. I'll see you over there.